Well, one themed garden that's getting a lot of attention from our studio garden visitors is our tropical garden, and that's primarily because of our banana plants. And many of the visitors refer to it as a banana tree, and I want to clarify that it's actually a herbaceous plant like a perennial versus a tree like a woody ornamental. So it's really not a banana tree, it's more of a herbaceous plant that obviously we can't overwinter, that it needs protection. And primarily it's herbaceous because of the fleshy stem that you'll notice. Also, on the banana plants, you'll notice that a lot of times you'll see them that have suckers, and that's how most people will get a start, from some of these suckers. Now, we actually ordered ours in the mail earlier in the season and we got them as corms, and I want to show you how you would plant that, whether you are fortunate enough to get a sucker. And these are also called pups, by the way. But usually you don't want to cut any of those off until they're at least a foot in height, and that's what we've done here. And we've just gone in with the knife and cut it off from the side of one of the other parent plants, and this is the pup again. Now, one thing I want to caution you about, and you'll notice here, the sap is very sticky, and you really should keep that away from your clothes because it can oxidize and it's terrible to stain clothes, so be careful anytime you're working with them. But whether you should get the pup like this or the corm, when you plant it, you want to be careful not to cover it up entirely. Really, you need about 20% of that corm or stalk above the soil line. So we're going to fluff this around and kind of work it down to hold it up. And we're going to pack the soil around it then. And again, if you use the corm that you'll get through the mail when you start them out, remember to leave part of that exposed. Now, you can tap them down. We may have to even stake this one initially. But when you receive a corm in the mail to plant them, be careful too not to overwater them, because if it's just the corm, it's not really going to have any roots on it or foliage like this one does, and so it's real easy to overwater early on and you can cause them to rot. This one, it won't be too bad of a problem because the roots are there and it should take off pretty quickly. So that's really a nice way to share them with your neighbors and friends, or again, a lot of times if you order them through the mail. Now, most of the bananas are what we call clumping formats, where they send up the suckers like this. And this particular variety is called Zebrina or Zebrina, and it's really more of an ornamental type. You'll notice the variegation on the foliage, nice maroon and green color. It doesn't get nearly as big as some of the other banana plants. It's about 4 to 5 feet, so it's more of a dwarf variety, and primarily grown to be used in a container for patio situations. It will set fruit occasionally, but they're very heavily seeded, and really they're considered inedible because of that. Now, some people will try to eat them and they're just not really very digestible more than anything if you're fortunate enough to get the fruit. So again, this is more of a small, compact one. Now, I also want to show you one that is also so-called dwarf, and this is truly amazing. I mean, if you've been out here earlier this season, you know that these banana plants have just pretty much taken over. When we first put this in, we planted it directly into the ground, and it was in a 7-gallon pot, so it was just a couple of feet tall. And we measured it today, and the circumference is 4 feet. That is just truly amazing. This thing has just grown and grown and grown. And the cultivar that we're talking about here, it's referred to commonly as red-leafed banana because of the red tint to the foliage. Again, the main vein or rib here is also reddish color. But the cultivar is actually called Morellii. And the neat thing about this one, even though it's dwarf, is you'll notice that the leaves are very big, but if you get back down at the trunk part, it's non-clumping. It doesn't send up any suckers, and that's very unusual for most banana plants. And notice that as the leaves start to die on us, we'll cut those off, and we're getting this appearance. And again, you've got to be careful with that sticky sap. But the thing to remember about banana plants is that they like well-drained soil, good rich organic soil, slightly acidic, about 5.5 to 6.5, and they really prefer being planted in full sun. Now, most people that try to overwinter them in Oklahoma plant them on the south side for more protection. You can get by with as much as 80% shade, but really, again, they prefer the full sun. The other thing to keep in mind on bananas is that they're real sensitive to wind, and obviously in Oklahoma we have windy conditions. Ours did quite well through most of the summer, except these last few weeks where we've been getting some fall storms, and you can see the leaves have been shredded here from the wind. And this will cause them to die. And sometimes people get in trouble with this because they won't get production. And you really need anywhere from 10 to 12 leaves on a plant for it to be mature enough to set fruit. Now, you're saying, can you actually get banana trees to fruit in Oklahoma? Well, yes, you can. Recently, we were fortunate enough to visit with a gentleman in Stillwater named Mr. Don Lorette, and one of our ambassadors, Betty Howell, went along with us, and he had a fruit cluster on his banana tree. Now, the key to getting bananas to fruit is that the stalk has to be growing and mature for at least 12 to 15, even 18 months. Well, we obviously get freezes in that time, so you have to manipulate it some way to accomplish that. He would protect it, take it in the garage, or wrap it to keep it from freezing. And so fortunately, he got one to bloom for him. And let me tell you a little bit about the bloom there. You'll notice that on the banana fruit, there was a little flower on each cluster of fruit, and that's actually the female flower. And those fall off not too long after the cluster shows, and the entire cluster of fruit is referred to as the hand, and each banana is referred to as the finger. Well, there's a point that the hands will quit forming, you won't get any more fruit, and the big flower on the bottom that's very attractive is the male flower. But the thing about bananas, they're actually parthenocarpic, or that means they're self-fruitful, so they really don't need to be pollinated. They'll set fruit without pollination. So once those fruit were not forming anymore, we encouraged Mr. Lorette to cut the male flower off, which he did, and that will help size them up. Now, usually by the time that the fruit is set on bananas in Oklahoma, we're getting really close to frost. So you want to cut that flower off to help them size up a little bit. But another trick we've been hearing about is to actually wrap the entire cluster or hand of fruit in a plastic bag, and that will cause the ethylene gas from the banana to help ripen them more. And then if anything, if you really pay attention to the weather, because if it's going to freeze, you definitely should cut that off, hang it in the garage where it won't freeze, because the cold will definitely damage the bananas, and you can get them to ripen inside, but be aware of mosquitoes and flies that are really attracted to them. But cutting that off is very helpful to get it to mature on you quicker too. Now, you also got to be careful, because sometimes a cluster of fruit can be so heavy that it will break off, so it's not uncommon to want to prop them up with a pole, and that will help relieve some of the pressure a little bit. And really on the banana plants, there's not too many pest problems. Sometimes you'll find like mealybugs or spider mites on them. This one we've not had any problems whatsoever on them. But check for them, especially if you're going to take them inside, because banana plants do make some good house plants, and that's one thing that you want to keep in touch with if you take them inside especially. Now quickly, let me show you some plants over here that we're growing that are cousins to the banana, and that's the bird of paradise, or the Strepsia is a genus. This one here is a traditional one that most people grow, and you'll see a flower spike here coming up, one over here too, but it bloomed for us in early spring, and many times they'll bloom again in the fall with the cool temperatures. The one back behind it is a giant cultivar that has whitish colored flowers, so we've never got it to flower yet, and it takes a long time to get some of these to flower. They need to size up, but the thing about them is they're also tropical, so you want to be careful and not let them freeze on you. The other nice thing is, really, if you just think about all the things we talked about on bananas, really the same principles apply. They like good soil, a little bit acidic. The only difference would be they actually prefer a little bit more shade. Now, not full dense shade, but more broken shade than the bananas do. So they're very related. The one thing that I would tell you that's different though in the banana plant is once a banana stalk produces a fruit, that main stalk is going to die. It will never produce anymore. So those suckers are what would then come up to produce. And so that's why we would encourage on the banana plant to maybe cut all of the stalks or suckers off except for one, and that would help get your main stalk bigger, and then you can use the other one to replace it. You don't really have to worry about that though on the bird of paradise. So if you'll join us in the next week or two, we're going to be talking about how to best overwinter these plants to make sure that you can enjoy their beauty for years to come.